Is the Democratic Party rigging the primaries against Bernie Sanders? Welcome back to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Ladies and gentlemen, we are finally approaching the end of a Democratic primary season that has lasted approximately 10,000 years. Just kidding. It's only been 2.5 years since the first Democratic candidate announced his 2020 run in July 2017. Remember him? Yeah, good old, what's his name? Yeah, John Delaney. Totally knew that. At one point, there were 24 Democratic Party candidates. Ah, Marianne Williamson. I miss those days. Now only 3 are left. And one thing has been very clear in this 31-month-long bloodbath. Some candidates were not favored by the Democratic establishment. In fact, I made a whole episode about the strange treatment Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard got, called "Is the Media Choosing Our Candidates?" Now obviously the Democratic establishment wants a candidate who can defeat Donald Trump. And for a while, it seemed like Senator Bernie Sanders was taking the lead, especially after he came in first in the New Hampshire primary and a close second in Iowa. Both times, Sanders was way ahead of Joe Biden. Even though Sanders lost the South Carolina primary to Joe Biden, Sanders' team managed to raise almost $50 million going into the March 3rd Super Tuesday elections. Fueled by an army of grassroots supporters, Sanders has consistently been the top fundraiser of the 2020 cycle. That's pretty surprising, considering Joe Biden was thought to be the frontrunner for a long time. But over the past several months, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren seem to be feeling the burn, shall we say? But all along there was a question. Would the Democratic establishment let Sanders get the nomination? Sanders calls himself a Democratic Socialist. His political views are too radical for the Democratic Party establishment, and they see that as a liability in the 2020 election. At least that's according to Bernie Sanders.
You know, the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, a group called Third Way, attacked me, and they said I'm an existential threat to the Democratic Party. And what I said is, yeah, I'm an existential threat to the corporate wing of the Democratic Party.
Back in the 2016 election, when the Democratic primaries narrowed down to Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton, Sanders had the same grassroots following. But Hillary Clinton was the establishment candidate. And some, like MSNBC's Joe Scarborough, felt the primaries were rigged against him.
We've been talking about rigged systems. We're putting up right now a graphic. Bernie Sanders wins 56 to 44% in Wyoming. The delegates rewarded. Hillary Clinton 11, Bernie Sanders 7. Why does the Democratic Party even have voting booths?
No, why?
This system is so rigged.
So how did Sanders end up with fewer delegates than Clinton? Well, 4 out of the 11 delegates for Clinton were superdelegates. They can support whoever they want to, and they were with her. Which means that although Bernie won the majority of the vote, he and Hillary split Wyoming's delegates evenly. Why? Well, Wyoming wasn't a primary, it was a caucus. You can say that again. And complicated caucus rules meant that in the end, both candidates got 7 pledged delegates. I know it sounds like the Wyoming caucus was unfair to Sanders, but he actually did much better in caucuses than in primaries in 2016. And the rest is history. Clinton swept the nomination only to lose to Trump. Now it's the 2020 election. Sanders is back in the race. Would the Democratic Party try to stop Sanders this time around? That could be disastrous for the Democratic Party, at least according to Bernie Sanders.
Is if at the end of the entire Democratic process, a candidate, maybe Bernie Sanders, ends up with more votes than anybody else, and we go into the convention, and the Democratic establishment and the superdelegates say, hey, yeah, Bernie won more votes than anybody else. He won state after state after state, but we don't want him. Do you know what that will do to the Democratic base in this country?
The Democratic establishment does not want Sanders. But this time, instead of using superdelegates to install the candidate of their choice, it seems they've come up with a different strategy: getting the candidates who drop out to support Joe Biden.
Joe Biden is heading into Super Tuesday with a lot of help from his friends.
We have found that leader in Vice President, soon-to-be President, Joe Biden.
Vote for decency, vote for dignity, vote for a heart for our country.
I will be casting my ballot for Joe Biden.
Former rivals Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rouke seeking to boost Biden and prevent Bernie Sanders from winning the nomination.
Yep, Biden won the South Carolina primaries by a pretty big margin.
The press and the pundits declared my candidacy dead. Now, thanks to the heart of the Democratic Party in South Carolina, I'm very much alive.
And then, most of his competitors just so happened to drop out and endorse him.
Our goal has always been to help unify Americans to defeat Donald Trump and to win the era for our values. The best way to keep faith with those goals and ideals is to step aside and help bring our party and our country together.
Do you think him dropping out of the race makes your path forward on Super Tuesday a little bit easier?
He was a real competitor. He is a real competitor, and I think it probably does.
What a sudden twist! So how did Biden do during Super Tuesday?
This is where the delegate race stands as votes continue to come in from California.
I guess that worked. The race is pretty much between Biden and Sanders now. Well, there's also Tusli Gabbard, but it's clear the establishment has decided to cut her out even further by not even letting her debate. As for Bloomberg and Warren, following Super Tuesday, Bloomberg dropped out and threw in with Biden. Elizabeth Warren also dropped out of the race, but has not yet endorsed a candidate. You might think she's going to endorse Sanders, but maybe not. So is this proof that the Democratic Party is rigging things against Bernie Sanders? Well, for one, that depends on what your definition of rigged is. Yes, the Democratic Party and the mainstream media have done a lot to discourage outsider candidates. But convincing establishment politicians to drop out of the race and endorse one of their own? Is that really rigging an election? Let a master show you how to rig an election. First, Putin made sure his most prominent foe was blocked from the ballot. Then observers and individual voters reported widespread violations, including ballot box stuffing and forced voting. Some of it was even caught on camera, but it didn't matter. Now that's rigging an election. Other candidates dropping out, plus the slew of endorsements, definitely helped Biden. But voters didn't have to vote for him instead of Sanders. But they did. And part of that might be because more moderate Democrats voted than those who were far left. According to exit polls, more Democrats who voted in Super Tuesday states identified as moderate and fewer identified as very liberal compared to 2016. It's probably good to remember that people who vote aren't necessarily the same as the people who are the loudest on Twitter. So very suddenly, the tide has turned in Joe Biden's favor. Some would say almost suspiciously so. But Bernie Sanders is not out of the race, and some of his supporters are fighting mad.
And now we got absolute dig-in warfare against the establishment. But we didn't start the war. They'll lie about it again. We didn't start the war. They started the war. So you want to go to war? We'll go to war. And that is what this is. We cannot let Biden win. Biden is either near senile or actually senile.
Hey, fun side note, YouTube is funding that guy with 6 figures to make a nonpartisan academy for aspiring local news reporters. Meanwhile, for America Uncovered, YouTube constantly demonetizes our videos and even unsubscribes fans without notifying them. But it's not just even-keeled, nonpartisan newsmen supporting Sanders. Even the president himself has come to his aid.
Democrats are working hard to destroy the name and reputation of crazy Bernie Sanders and take the nomination away from him.
And can I just say, on this show, I really do try to be as nonpartisan as possible. Really, it doesn't matter what political party a politician belongs to. I will still make fun of them. Speaking of which, I think folks from all parts of the political spectrum can agree. A Trump-Sanders debate would probably be the most entertaining presidential debate in history. So what do you think? Did the Democratic establishment rig the primary against Sanders? Have it out in the comments below. And remember, please subscribe, like, and share this episode, because YouTube sure as heck isn't funding this show. In fact, they've been unsubscribing people with no notifications, so you might want to check your own subscription. Also, visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered to learn more about how you can support this show, when YouTube won't. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.